Too often this world disarticulates the notions of access and excellence, as if expanding access dilutes the quality. But that's wrong. It's actually the opposite, because true excellence is the result of access. When institutions hire young people like you, you see the world differently. You bring your cultural knowledge, you bring your language skills, your lived experiences, and these places don't get weaker, they get sharper, they get more relevant, and they get bigger. I do worry about the bigger picture that you're walking into, though. We're living in a time of eroding public trust in higher education and in the very idea of an educated citizenry. People are questioning whether college is worth it, whether the arts are necessary, and treating experience as something that is optional, even suspicious. And that erosion has led to polarization, disinformation, and a generation that's told to distrust the spaces that could actually empower them. And here's the hard truth. If we lose faith in education and culture, then we lose the very tools that hold our democracy together. Every major leap forward I had was because somebody said you belong here. So mentorship is necessary, but also sponsorship, and there's a difference. Someone saying your name in rooms when you're not there, someone advocating for you. So as you grow, keep seeking those mentors and sponsors, and now you get to be one, right? You get to become a path maker and not a gatekeeper.
I learned early that family isn't about DNA. It's about people who choose you and the people you choose back. Even now, I think adoption is still misunderstood. People often associate it with trauma. But I see it as one of the most profound and intentional ways to build a family. And the families you'll meet tonight, along with the ones who couldn't be here, prove that adoption isn't about what's missing, it's about what's possible.
What does unapologetically you mean to you?
Well, I talked about it in the show, actually. They did cut it because it got a little teary and deep, but so I'm adopted. I grew up in the Midwest, and I didn't really know many other Asian people, and I didn't know any gay people who were out or anything. So I talked about in the show that I really wish I wanted to be white, I wanted to be straight, I wanted to be all these other things. And so now that I've been on this planet for 42 years, I'm beyond that, but it took some time. So I think, being yourself fulsomely and unapologetically, a lot of times it's about leading with your values, both at work and at home. And I think that the bifurcation of the two now is completely blown out of the water because of COVID. I think if we all haven't done some soul searching in the last 3 years, you've missed the point of a worldwide pandemic. And on the flip side of that, I do actually think there's some toxicity to the idea of bringing your whole self to all the public spaces that you go into, especially like work. So for example, if a white colleague volunteers for Asian American Pacific Islander Month activities, where I work, they're lauded as allies, as they should, and they get a pat on the back, but it's sort of expected that I will do it. And so there's the other self too, that, well, obviously I want to be able to be comfortable in my own skin at work. It shouldn't be mandatory that I serve in all the different kind of identities that I bring to the table, right? Because that's just called free labor. So growing up, or if you follow her work, she is incredibly progressive and welcoming and just an amazing person, and she surrounds herself with amazing people. During the casting, and again, not bad intention, but I did get asked so part of the casting was we just had to keep meeting with lots of NBC producers who'd done stuff like The Amazing Race and Top Chef and stuff. And so you'd get asked a lot of the same questions because different people would come to you at different points in the audition process, which was about 4.5 months. And I kept getting asked, do I make ethnic food? And so I would play dumb and say, oh, I think all food is ethnic. What do you mean? And then they would sort of squirm a little bit, and then they're like, and I'd say, if you're asking if I make Asian food, like Korean or Japanese, which is what I am, I said, then you're gonna be really disappointed. And actually I said, don't cast us. If you are looking for that kind of food, I was raised in the Midwest. I can make a casserole or a pie. My mom's a Russian Jew. I can make all that stuff. My dad's from the South. But I was like, I cannot go on a show and be comfortable or authentic if you're now what are you gonna make? There's only so many ways I know how to use matcha, you know what I mean? So we actually said we will absolutely walk away from this if you want us to play a role. In fundraising, I run around and chase rich people and ask for their money. So there's already an inherent like dynamic. But all the
Watch
staff,
your wallets.
huh?
Watch your wallets.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't get it at home, so I'm gonna go out into the world and get the money. So, but I mean, I do a lot of training and not role playing, but just like real frank discussions with my staff that's BIPOC. And I think that anybody who comes from a background that's not mainstream should have a couple quick phrases at the ready, so that you can like maneuver around these to achieve your goal. Because yes, sometimes taking it head on is not, you don't have the energy that day, nor should you have to do it, but also sometimes you do have to work through it to get to your goal. So if somebody's saying, somebody said something to me pretty controversial about like race and police, and I let him say his thing, and then I just said, yeah, I think a lot of people agree with you. So anyway, and like, so it's not shutting it down, it's acknowledging that something has been said, but then it's like moving on to the next one. There's so much code switching that happens in the work that I do, particularly because I grew up in a really low income family, but here I am in this elite world.
Can you explain code? Do people know what code switching is? Yes, no?
Yeah,
so?
it's like modifying your behavior to make another party comfortable, or you sort of put on a different, act or something like that. So for code switching, I would, depend on what I want to wear. Like if I'm meeting with a very conservative donor, I might not wear, Keith Haring sneakers. If I'm meeting with a more progressive donor, I might, be more myself, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of again, working with BIPOC staff, I just have to say it's inevitable, but you don't have to feel powerless against this. There's some options. You can work through it with phrases, again, like, oh, a lot of people agree with you, or, oh, that's really interesting. I think the most agnostic word is interesting, right? You can say that to anything. That's interesting. I do that a lot when I really need to move on to the next thing. But I also tell my team, you do have the right, and I will absolutely support you if it gets so off the rails, to just say, I need to excuse myself from this meeting and get up and leave. And I've certainly done that, and I tell my team, it's like, there's nothing worth your dignity here at this job. It ain't that deep. So like, you can get up and go, but to achieve our goals, we do kind of have to. The opposite, actually. I internalized all the racism and I pushed it down. I don't know if I thought it would bubble up as creativity or something at some point. Oh, I guess it did. But no, I did the opposite. I ran away from it. So when I was adopted in the late 70s, it was pretty much all the adoptions were closed. And so I knew nothing about my parents, and I was in this white community. So I just wanted to be white. I mean, it's sad, I have journals and stuff from that time that I'll read from time to time just to remind myself of like how far. Be a path maker, not a gatekeeper. And like everyone in this room has so much influence. I was so impressed by the presentations I saw earlier. I was like, look at this amazing group of people. They're here at 9:30 on a Saturday in a ballroom talking about all the showing you how to reverse engineer all these incredible projects for their community. Like, you all have such influence in your communities. And so I just be loud about your values. You're not gonna always live up to them, no one does. But no, be loud about them. And since I've been around since when dinosaurs roamed the earth, what's been fascinating for me to see with the radical shift of social media is that when it started for us, it was about keeping your family and friends updated about things, and now it's about engaging with strangers. So you have a really powerful way to do that. And again, I don't see the bifurcation between work and life. It's just, this is who you are, and these are the things that you care about, and then great things will come from that if you lead from that space. The culture of learned helplessness in philanthropy, particularly when it comes to the notions of diversifying staff and power dynamics with donors. So, one of the things that I try to teach my senior leaders is exercise the agency that you already have. Stop asking for the agency. You already have a lot of agency. I should back up too, and just because we're talking about diversity and how I set the table, what those terms mean, because we all have our own DEI, DEIB, EISJ, LMNOP, whatever. The way I define those words, at least in the context of New York City and at the New School, and it's going to be different at every organization, but diversity is a fact. It is. We don't really even need to talk about that as a concept. What I'm more interested in is equity and inclusion. So equity is a choice, inclusion is an action. And then belonging, the word that we kind of get hung up on, which is really warm and fuzzy, is the word I think people like to run to because it sounds nice. but I'm not really interested in that because you don't get to claim that. That's just your teams, your culture will tell you if there's belonging, because that's the result of the choices and actions you make regarding equity inclusion. So in terms of the learned helplessness in the form of diversifying staff, as I mentioned earlier, 90% of our field is white. And so how many of us have heard, oh gosh, it's really hard, or but we just have to keep recommitting ourselves, or how many written resolutions have we read about this? How many hyperlinks to how to be an anti-racist have we all been pushed through in the last 4 years? That's not it. That's not actually diversifying staff. Diversifying staff is actually not very complicated. It is hard because it's a systemic issue, but it's not actually very hard. It is about putting people of color in leadership, and then people follow because they see that you're living your values and you're not just talking about them. And then to your question earlier about burnout and remote work, I think one of the great tools we have now is that flexibility, right? Not asking communities of color to live in communities where they're not safe, or they're not perceived to be safe. So that's it. That's how you diversify your staff, because there's hundreds of us. And we also happen to be qualified. So that is, how about that, right? So the notion that there's no pipeline, all that kind of stuff is just, it's not true. The other piece, power dynamics with donors. I've been in this business 18 years. A lot has changed. 7 out of 10 Americans used to give to something when I started. Now 4 out of 10 do. A lot has changed, and particularly with how we relate to donors. The days of the donor always being right is over, right? I mean, mainstream media has picked up on the big cases like Sackler, Epstein, gifts of looted art, quid, and certainly right now, quid pro quos with influential and rich donors trying to weigh in on, political issues, particularly around policy, about protests, that kind of thing. Which I know nothing about, being on a college campus right now. But that piece of it is really specifically letting your staff of colors know you have their back, letting you know that you will walk away from a bad gift. Not all gifts are good gifts. And that just comes down to training, advocacy, the difference between sponsorship and mentorship, all that kind of stuff. Because there's, again, back to social science, there's so much research showing that, racism is literally bad for your health, and that it'll have people leave, and then you won't be able to retain. So that's where I am.
He just says so, as if he just didn't drop the most gold and wisdom right there. I saw the chat lighting up. I see the hearts and the claps. I think people are feeling seen. They are wanting to live in this world. We are wanting to work in this world and work in this ways.
There's this overarching culture of learned helplessness because it is such a titanic thing, academia, and it's hard to move, and the incoming problems are so fast. So we have lobbyists, and we sort of get interlocutors to come and try to address some of those issues, but we as institutions are still doing some of the things that we railed against a decade ago. We're still just articulating the notions of access and excellence. We are now quickly retreating away from anything related to DEI or illegal DEI, whatever that is. So, I mean, to your point about standing up and exercising the agency that we already have, we are quite a powerful bloc. I think when I worked at Columbia was the 7th largest employer in New York, period. Not of nonprofits or for-profits, period. Of sheer volume of force, we know celebrities, we know the press. This is exactly playing into the right sphere of we know everyone, we control the media. But we kind of do. We could do a better job of controlling the messaging. And I think that sort of buying into cynicism that only bolsters the status quo. So everybody in this room, since we're all leaders at our institutions, how we show up is part of our performance. Too, right? Beyond the metrics, how we show up, as long as if we don't lead from a place of progress, every day right now in particular, then the status quo will. There's enough money on this planet. I think what concerns me more is the erosion of public trust in higher education, the declining value of the notion of an educated citizenry. These are things that fundraisers cannot do on our own, and I'm not even sure if this is for policymakers. So those are the things that make me much more concerned, and the way that I found parents to be a heat shield against some of that and against miscommunication and just outright lies was actually in times of crisis at the new school, which were much written about in the New York Times. It's lovely when the Times is also your local paper. So when I was there, we had strikes, we had encampments, we had deficits, we had all sorts, everything that you wouldn't want as a president or as a fundraiser. And what I found very helpful was having a parent council that was strongly united where I could give them information that was clear-eyed and sober, and that they could deliver it to those horrible things called Facebook page groups, where the parents all meander and talk about the mattress and talk about this or whatever. The parents of the food, the parents are going to hear it from another parent before they hear it from the senior vice president of the institution that they're mad at. So I actually found that the parent groups, it's not necessarily fundraising, but to your point, the marketing and communication of it, they were very useful allies in times of great distress. And I don't think anyone could argue that we're not in a moment of great distress right now in terms of higher education. So I think there's almost a grassroots mobilization that should probably occur within that, since this is supposedly built on a model of shared governance.